Okay, so then there's this key differences between BNNs and ANNs, biological and artificial neural networks. So their focus here is on the properties for each one. They focus on training data requirements. So in BNNs, we have evolutionary pre-training, innate threat detection, and feature extraction. So that's the way they kind of state that. So in other words, like you have things that are innate or encoded in, for different animals, like if you have a fight or flight response, that's evolutionary pre-training. Innate threat detection and feature extraction are things also that are innate that are kind of analogous to pre-training in an artificial neural network. And then, of course, you have large data sets in artificial neural networks. One thing they didn't point to here is that biological neural networks don't require a lot of quote-unquote training, where the training, rather, is not, you don't have to learn, you don't have to be exposed to the environment as much as possible to learn things. I mean, you get exposed in development to things. We've talked about that before, where development is about being exposed to a lot of things, but also like being focused on different things and playing with them and seeing how they behave. So it's a very different type of training than like what you get in artificial neural networks. So there's that difference too, but I'll put that aside for now. The second property is energy efficiency. So biological neural networks operate on a few watts of glucose, and artificial neural networks have high computational resource consumption. So this is like where we have our huge data centers that require a lot of energy versus like a human brain that requires basically food and water. And then, that's enough energy to produce, what the brain does. Then the third point is intra-network communication. So this is where we have the focus on synapses, complex biochemical interactions at synapses. You get all sorts of signaling at synapses, as opposed to artificial neural networks where we have simple mathematical operations such as addition and convolution. So, in the biological brain, you have these, biochemical signals. You have binding to receptors, things like that. In ANNs, and then you can maybe characterize those as mathematical operations. In artificial neural networks, they're basically, the operations are the entire sort of interaction between neurons. So it's all it's all kind of condensed into addition or convolution or multiplication or something like that. The learning mechanisms. In biological neural networks, we have self-organization, synaptic plasticity, and predictive coding. In artificial neural networks, we have gradient-based backpropagation. So that's one. This is kind of the example to use from artificial neural networks. The idea being is that artificial neural networks are optimized. They follow a gradient to learn things. In biological neural networks, basically learning is, I don't know if there's a gradient. People often refer to learning gradients, but they're kind of informal structures, and really the focus is on like synaptic plasticity, the predictive nature of the brain, and then self-organization of networks. So it's a very different sort of paradigm there. And so then the next one is systems architecture. So that's biological neurons with integrated storage and computation. And then in artificial neural networks, we have silicon-based transistors, von Neumann architectures, which separate memory and processing into two components. Whereas in biological networks, those things aren't necessarily separated, or if they are, they're in a network that interacts with each other. So it's a very different architecture. Emergent properties is the next property, and this is where we have, in biological neural networks, spontaneous oscillations, criticality, wave propagation, and homeostatic balance. And then in artificial neural networks, hierarchical feature representations and attractor dynamics. Okay, and then the last one is resilience to damage, which is in biological neural networks, dynamic rewiring and homeostatic plasticity, allowing for partial recovery. So this is where if you have damage to the system, how does it get fixed or recovered? And of course, this is something that the brain is well known for in terms of plasticity, but we have this sort of, we're interested in how the network rewires itself. So this is famous functional biological neural networks. And then in artificial neural networks, we have static redundancy, things like dropout, and limited on-the-fly recovery. So yeah, I would also add in terms of resilience to damage that there's also redundancy in the biological neural network. And, that also plays a role in recovering information. But there, and then there are connections between these like emergent properties. This area is really interesting, but it speaks to a lot of the other areas as well. And so I like this table, but you could probably keep revising it in terms of different properties and differences that you can think of. But I think the take-home message here is that biological neural networks do things a lot differently than artificial neural networks, and we can learn a lot from biological neural networks in a way that kind of gives us different paradigms of artificial neural networks, at least in terms of that they're sort of even if we had something like an organoid culture or an organoid intelligence, that it's artificial in the sense that it's been sort of cultured and curated by human experimenters, but it's still artificial in the sense that it's doing it's not like the actual biological system, but it looks very different from the artificial neural networks we use today.
I liked that, it's just seeing that in emergent properties, we've got Beggs, 2008, 2022, and this is the Indiana professor who replicated the mind in vitro, right? So the UIZUC Open Microelectrode Array project, his postdoc is the one that they end the paper with a postdoc was able to build our system in 15 hours and get his own thing running in Indiana, and it's Beggs.
Right.
So just like that.
Yeah, he's done this stuff with like brain criticality for years, thinking about how that happened. Yeah, thinking about how that happened.
Absolutely.
So and I would emergent properties. I might add it's kind of the brain or neural complexity or brain complexity. So we have all sorts of interesting properties of oscillations and coupled oscillators and things like that, and that provides these very complex dynamics that we don't see in artificial neural networks at all. I mean,